Welcome everybody to our pivot panels created by the Central Mountain Small Business Development Center. I'm Leanne Presley and I'll be your host for these sessions. I'm actually a local consultant here in the Salida area, and our idea with these pivot panels is to find business owners in Chaffee, Lake, and Park County that have gone through a pivot during the COVID experience. And we wanted to tease out from them some of their decision making, some of their thought processes, in an effort to share that with other business owners and hope that some of what they've learned will extrapolate to your business so that you have an easier time in this very challenging post-COVID, or I guess right now we're at April 28th. So we're still kind of right in the middle of what I would call phase 2 of our changes. So my guest today is Kristin Farr. She is the co-owner of Salado Restaurant located in Fairplay, Colorado. Welcome to our first pivot panel, Kristin.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I want to just jump right in and have you share with us a little bit of your background. What kind of a business do you have? And then tell us a little bit about some of the early challenges you had that you had to consider pivoting.
Sure. So we've been open for almost exactly 2 years. In fact, 2 years ago, yesterday, we signed the lease for Salado in Fairplay. It was a very exciting thing for my husband and I to really see come to fruition, because we've been looking at this space in particular for many years, and just had kind of a vision of what an incredible space this would be for a restaurant, and had a lot of time to really kind of plan and digest and come up with ideas and things that would suit this area and bring something fresh and new.
Awesome. So walk us through kind of what happened in the very beginning, when I'm sure, like a lot of other business owners, you got the news that we had the shelter in place, restaurants need to close. What were some of the first things you did to deal with that news?
Well, first of all, it was very surreal and shocking, and the string of events that happened the week prior with, the NBA shutting down, felt very real. And we were trying to be very aware and reactive to any information that had been given to us. So we were slightly prepared, knowing that we may have to close temporarily or do some changes. But when it actually came across through our phones as an alert that we had to close that night. Right. So at that point in time, I mean, the shock in itself really was kind of hard to absorb, but we closed the next day. We posted a sign that night. I told all of my employees, I don't know what to expect.
Right.
If I were you, I would beat the curve and the influx of mass amounts of people applying for unemployment, and
right.
just get things set in place now.
Okay.
The time was our staff, and making sure that they had a clear understanding of, what was going to happen, but there really wasn't any. We just knew we were going to have to close.
Right. Okay. And then shortly thereafter, you had another pivot where you decided maybe you could do a little bit of alternative service, right? Talk us through that a little bit. I understand it was maybe curbside or delivery. How did you come to make that decision, and talk us through the arrival of that sort of new business pivot?
Sure. So again, just really paying attention to the news and listening to our governor's recommendations or restrictions.
Right.
So, we closed for 24 hours, then decided to go ahead and open again on that following Wednesday, to attempt to do curbside pickup and to-go orders.
Okay.
And still serving our full menu, hadn't made any menu changes at that time.
Okay.
At that time, we were not able to serve alcohol to go, so it was just food. We did have a pretty good response that first day. A lot of our local people came out, ordered to go, and assured us that they would be consistent and really try and keep us open. So
right.
So incredibly reassuring.
Yeah.
That being said, it was just my husband and I, so no employees at this time. We just wanted to see what we could do ourselves.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. So you're doing all the prep work, all the food cooking and everything,
Yes.
just the two of you. Oh, wow.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah,
a pivot.
a little bit of practice on the line. It was fun.
Wow.
But
okay. And how did that go? Is that something that you're continuing with now, or talk me through what happened with that scenario?
Sure. It went well. The first few days were, we did limit our hours. So we made the decision to just be open for 7 hours, which we thought was pretty reasonable, seeing as we're normally open 7 days a week from 11 to 9. We
Wow.
decided to go 5 days a week from 12 to 7.
Okay.
And every day was so different. There was no consistency. We did see a lot of familiar faces, which was amazing. Some days were really great. Some days were crickets for hours. So just the emotional impact that has to be in a, environment where everything inside is closed. There's,
right.
No staff, no energy.
Right.
So that was challenging. So we tried that for about 10 days. And though we saw an incredible response from our regular customers, our locals, our amazing community, that was amazing. It just wasn't enough to keep a building running with the same amount of electricity, the same amount of gas. It started to become a little scary, and we made the decision that we just needed to close and have some time to evaluate things, to reset, to determine what kind of menu we could serve in the future, and really just being at the mercy of the daily decisions that were being made by our government, and just trying to pay attention to what was happening and how we could navigate every day.
How did you and your husband make some of those decisions in terms of the shift and the pivot in operations?
Well, like I said, we really wanted to remain open, and it was basically the busiest time of March. So it was going into spring break. We had ordered very heavily for food and alcohol in anticipation of a really great spring break. There was fresh snow. It was, everything was poised for a fantastic March. So that being said, a large amount of food was prepared and ready. So what we really wanted to do was try to utilize the resources that we had, while still serving the quality of food, the freshness. And then there came a time where we had to start eliminating things from our revised menu, 2 times revised, to make sure that we still had enough choices for people, but that we weren't having to place a food order, which can be a pretty substantial dollar amount and a lot of product that we didn't know if we would be able to get through, to use all of it, without spoiling or throwing a large amount of food away. So it was really just a day-to-day decision, and that was probably the hardest, is not knowing what was going to happen next, if there was any more restrictions that we were going to have to put in place. And it just came to the point where we just kind of had to throw in the towel temporarily and really reflect and figure out, how can we evolve? How can we do this?
Right. So at some point, you said after 10 days, you've decided, you make the decision that you have to pivot again. And that pivot comes in the form of closing operations completely. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we took that time. We said we would close. We were, being mindful of the dates that our governor had put forth, or our president saying, businesses can reopen Easter Sunday. So we kind of put that 2-week closure in place. We took that time to do some cleaning and some maintenance, and just kind of pay attention to other businesses, what they were doing. Also, it was really challenging to follow along all the potential benefits or assistance from the government. So giving me a chance, I'm more the administrative part of the team, gave me a chance to sit down on my computer, research, look for grants, fill out applications.
Right.
And mind you, doing this while trying to homeschool my children.
Yeah.
So for anybody that has become a teacher as a parent or parent as a teacher, it has been a big shift in our household too. So a lot of different things had changed overnight, and we were just trying to adapt. So that second pivot was really just, let's close for 2 weeks. Let's get, our act together. Let's try and figure out what we're going to do next. And so yeah, we kind of had 3 pivots actually.
Yeah. And I bet there's more to come.
I'm sure there are.
So let's talk about that really quickly. You're closed right now. We're not exactly sure when you're not exactly sure when you will reopen. Do you have a target date that you're hopeful about? Because now Governor Polis has been talking about, certain timeframes where we might be able to reopen restaurants. And I know you are subject to county restrictions as well. Do you have a date in mind that you're thinking of reopening?
Initially we thought mid-May. That is what the governor had said, that, we're rolling out the next phase of the shelter in place. So now we have the opportunity to possibly open middle of May.
Okay.
Now there were not many details initially with those, hopeful dates. So now we're getting more information daily from great resources like our food purveyors that are telling us what we need to order. We need to make sure we have masks. We're going to have infrared thermometers to take the temperature of all of our staff that will be coming.
Okay.
Just trying to be flexible. So I would say probably, Memorial Day weekend would be fantastic. Initially we thought middle of May would be great, but now there's all these restrictions in place. Masks are back ordered.
Right.
We do have an employee who's an amazing seamstress, so she's going to help make some masks for us as well. But we really have to put in a game plan and, make sure that we are fulfilling all of the restrictions and obligations that the CDC and the health department expect, as well as reassuring our customer base that we're doing everything we can to ensure their safety and our safety, because I believe that is the number one, I guess just the number one reason why we should be putting all these things in place tactfully and carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that businesses are going to have to change their entire paradigm going forward. Not just restaurants or retail, but really every business that has interaction with consumers are going to have to create what I call trust indicators, where you've got to have the masks. You've got to have, well, maybe you don't have to, but you could have the plexiglass in front of the register.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some places taping out what a 6-foot distance looks like.
Right.
So you said you're going to have masks. Are you already starting to think about what other trust indicators you might put into place for your business once you are reopened?
Well, yes. And I think a lot of that will be information and posting signs. We're trying to be very compliant, so trying to be really mindful of what those things are. Having hand sanitizer stations at the entrance of your restaurant. Having signs posted about social, or I should say physical distancing. Right. We are coming into our tourism season. This is the busiest time of year for us, starting in May. So we don't know what to expect. Will we see an influx of people traveling to the high country to get out of the cities, to camp and fish and do all the wonderful things that are already, an attraction here? So we're going to really have to think, not only are we going to have to educate ourselves and our local community, but those who are visiting here. Right. So I think a lot of signs will help, visual indicators, just things that help people so that we can all coexist with this new phase.
Yes, absolutely. For sure. So earlier on, you had mentioned that you made some of the decisions based on the inventory that you already had on hand. I'm curious, did you also open up your QuickBooks or your accounting system or whatever it is you use and do any sort of examination of the actual numbers? You know, for example, looking at your overhead and saying, all right, for our curbside, we need to do a certain amount of business in order to meet the overhead? Or was there any sort of work you did specifically in the financial realm that helped you make your decisions about pivoting?
Yes. And I mean, I think a lot of that was just determining what are, what are our running costs? How much does it cost to run this restaurant in a completely different perspective of no staff, using less energy to some extent because we're not running dishes through the dishwasher. We're putting everything in a to-go box. So there's so many variables. I wouldn't say that I had a pinpoint number that I was relying upon, but once I started seeing the difference in what we needed to make each day and what we were basically what was our running cost for every day, that's where things became a little scary. And just seeing without, like I said, without giving you specific numbers, but
Right.
going from what we anticipate being up from last year and then going into this year and seeing us at a fraction, I mean, a 20 to 30% at best of what we were used to running off of. So yeah, I did take a look at that, and it was alarming to say the least. So
Yeah. Which is part of why I assume you made the decision to close, right? Because you knew, looking at your numbers, that at some point you just weren't going to be able to have the revenue to support
yes,
the whole overhead of the business if you were only at 30% at best.
correct.
Yeah. And then you had mentioned to me earlier that one of the other decisions that you made to pivot to a closure had to do with your employees and their ability to apply for unemployment. We've talked a lot at the SBDC about some different government loans that are available. As of this recording, the PPP has funds and people are applying for that program. But you felt like that really wasn't going to be a good fit for you. Can you talk us through a little bit about that decision?
Sure. And I did. I mean, I, anxiously awaited, and thank you to the SBDC for the resources, and that I reached out and was so impressed with the individual attention and the guidance and the updates, because as we all know, things changed daily. So where something would have been, what I was supposed to do one day, that could have changed entirely the second day. So none of that was even in the scope of what we thought when we first closed and then went into our first pivot. Had no idea that there would be any government assistance, had no idea that there would be grants out there to apply for. We're just kind of blindly making decisions daily. So definitely took advantage of all the resources, signed up for the EIDL loan. That's when the CARES Act came out. I think that was at the end of March. And then the first day that the PPP was available, we applied for that as well. We didn't make the first cut, so now our application for that is in queue, and our banker assures us that as soon as those funds are available, that we're one of, I believe, 700 applications that will be submitted for that relief. So not knowing what our, options were at that time, I just wanted to make sure that my employees had a head start on getting their unemployment filled out, because it's not easy. It takes time. You have to wait for a PIN if you can even get through, and now things have become more challenging. So I think just really paying attention to what all of our options were really helped me navigate through our decision making.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the help you got from your SBD consultant. I would just do a quick little plug for those people that might not know. I mean, we have resources here in the county with designated, dedicated counselors that can do a one-on-one with somebody like you and help you brainstorm, help you walk through the numbers, help you think about operations and human resources and all the things that come into play when you are just you and your husband trying to figure it out on your own. There's no need to do that. The consulting's free for clients in Chaffee, Lake, and Park County. And you can go ahead and have that session, I believe up to 5 sessions, maybe even more, to be able to sort out some of your issues. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So Kristin, before we close, I'm wondering if you can share any sort of words of wisdom, maybe things that you learned the hard way, or just advice that you have for other listeners out there who might be considering how they can pivot in this phase.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my first thing would be don't give up. Utilize your resources, pay attention. I've been on more webinars, Zoom meetings, and anything that has a link that says click here, I do it. I try to figure out, I mean, we registered with the Hello Alice. It's a nonprofit that does grants. So I'm working on, or waiting to see if there's anything from that. I don't think putting, sorry to be a cliche, but putting all your eggs in one basket, spread it out. Be vulnerable. Know that there are some days that things don't seem like they're going to work out. And then there are other days when you just have to pick yourself up and keep going. But I would say the biggest thing was reaching out to different resources. Even companies like TripAdvisor have a lot of great links of things that you can do to help your business evolve to the next stage, given all the restrictions. Mm-hmm. So I think just really being aware of all the resources, and then, I mean, most importantly, having a relationship with somebody, like having the SBDCs, talking to the same person, knowing that if something changes, you're going to get an update, and just keep going and hope that something works out. We're still waiting, but we're going to still keep plugging forward.
Awesome. That's great advice. That's all we really can do at this point, is to keep moving forward, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much, Kristin Farr, owner of Salado Restaurant in Fairplay, Colorado. Really appreciate all of your insights and talking to us about your pivot moments. You've had several, and like we like to say at the SBDC, you know, this is not a sprint. It's not a marathon. It's more like several Ironmans, one after the other. So appreciate all your insight in helping us stay on that path and stay in training mode so we can get to the other side. So appreciate all your time today. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Leanne.